What's up, you guys, and welcome back to an all-new podcast, Beyond the Clippers. I got my man, Mr. Will Roundtree, in the building.
Yes, sir.
Listen, y'all, this is a jam-packed episode, so y'all got to stay tuned through the whole episode. I got, he's an author, a published author. Credit is king.
Credit is king.
Financial advisor.
Some say that.
So, Will, tell us about, how you got started, and tell us, well, where are you from initially?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, for those who don't know me, and first of all, thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
I know we've been building for the past few years, so definitely it's an honor to be on here with you. But for those who don't know, I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Midwest city. A lot of people not familiar with Milwaukee. It's not the sexiest city by the way of, popularity, but it's a city where you had to grow up and be tough. Had to grow up very quickly. After I graduated, I actually moved to Mississippi after my freshman year of high school. And so I went from the city, moved to Mississippi, lived on a farm on 120 acres with 3 houses. It was my grandparents' house, my uncle, and my aunt. And I always say that's where I established my work ethic. So after school, I'm literally chopping wood and working on the farm, and it was a culture shock.
So how long did you do that?
So I lived with my grandparents for a year and a half. And then my parents moved to Mississippi, and then we moved to they call it the town. So
I know all about it.
Yeah, we moved to the town. It wasn't nothing. I mean, the biggest store was Walmart. So that lets you know it wasn't much in the city. And so graduated, moved back to Milwaukee the day of my graduation. Moved back to Milwaukee, was just trying to find myself in life. Ended up getting into entrepreneurship, started learning about personal development. And then in 2005, I moved to Las Vegas, and I've been in Las Vegas ever since.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Vegas nice. I like Vegas.
I like Vegas too. Definitely like
That's
Vegas.
That's a big change from Milwaukee.
Definitely a big change. The weather, the culture. For the first 3 years, I had to get used to not seeing snow. It took me a while to get used to that.
Absolutely. So before you started doing credit repair,
yes,
what were you doing?
So, I was like most people. My parents told me, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, quote unquote.
Go to college.
Right. So I actually dropped out of college. And the interesting part about that, I was an A student all through high school. School was boring to me, and so attempted to go to college. I think I went for computers. I don't even remember. Was in there for a semester and a half. Found out that was not going to make me wealthy. I actually asked my teacher. I was like, it was my economics class. Said, hey, will this route help me to become wealthy? He said, no. I never went back to school. And so dropped out. But to answer your question, how I got into the credit space was before I moved to Las Vegas, I had a mentor who said, Will, eventually credit will become the new dollar. This was around 2004. Moved to Vegas, and I quickly found out what he meant by that. Couldn't buy couldn't rent an apartment with bad credit unless you had to put down 3 times the deposit. Couldn't buy a car without a down payment or a cosigner. And I'm like 26, and I just found it hard for me to call my mom's and ask her to cosign for me. How can I be out here trying to talk to females and I'm in a car that I had to get a cosigner for?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it just didn't make sense to me. And I just quickly started to see that credit was the barometer literally for everything in my life. And so took it upon myself around 2005, 2006, really to start learning this thing called credit. So started doing some research. I remember, Google wasn't as big as it is now. YouTube wasn't as big. So I used to have to go to the library and just do a bunch of research, and started learning how credit is needed for everything. And so kind of fast forward, was able to buy a vehicle with no down payment, no cosigner. It blew my mind because I always assumed you had to put money down on a car.
Right.
And when I bought my first vehicle, when I had established credit, and I didn't have to put money down, it blew me away. I'm like, I don't have to put money down. I don't have to give you 10 references.
Yeah. I never, when I go to, if I ever buy a car from a car lot, I never want to put money down.
Period. I don't care how much the car costs.
Absolutely.
And people don't understand that. And so that the light bulb went off. And then I was able to buy my home around 2012. And coming from Milwaukee, where I come from, being a homeowner was something I never even thought was possible.
Right.
And so when I started to see the possibilities of what credit can do, I almost felt like, you know what, we were bamboozled as a community, because credit was something we didn't talk about. Absolutely. In my household, in the communities. And
I think it's just in our culture, period. You know?
Literally, it really is. And so I said, you know what, if it's something to this, I want to be able to share my experience with just my friends and family, just like I would share a good movie recommendation.
Right.
So started talking to my friends and family, and they didn't want to listen. So I said, you know what, I got to share this with somebody. I'm excited. And so it really just kind of started as me wanting to go out there and just tell people about it. I started learning more about, different home ownership programs. I started connecting and networking with realtors. So I never got into this to do credit repair. And a story that I've actually I don't think I've ever shared this story, how I actually ended up getting in credit repair itself. I ended up meeting a gentleman who started doing credit repair. And I had just started learning about credit, and he and I kind of partnered together on a couple things, and he wasn't operating in the most ethical way. And he actually, took some people money. Right. But the clients would call me because they, I guess I was the most personable one out of us two. And because I wanted to save face and I didn't want my name turned into mud, I said, you know what, I'll just finish you guys credit, and any other clients you have, I'll just do it for free. And so it really kind of started as me just wanting to educate people. And then the credit repair came because this other person was taking people money. Wow. And then I said, you know what, I want to focus more on the education, because I started to learn 60% of people who go through credit repair usually end up back in the same situation.
So let me ask you this. So when they do go through credit repair, like, what is the percentage of getting approved after the repair?
That's a great question. So an actual percentage would be a little bit difficult to determine, because not everybody goes through credit repair to go for an approval of something. But I will say that a lot of people who go through credit repair, typically their main goal is to buy a house. And the approval percentage for that is very high, which I can probably say anyone who we worked with, we're at probably about 90+%.
So is it true that you have a different score from a mortgage score from a car loan?
Absolutely. So if you go and pull your FICO report on myfico.com, I'm not trying to give them no shine or nothing, but that's where you got to go. Most people don't know there's different FICO scores for different types of lending that they want to apply for. So you have an auto score, you have a mortgage score, you have a score to apply for credit cards, and et cetera, et cetera. So for example, you can have a mortgage is the easiest score to qualify for, because you can have a 580 and get approved for a mortgage. Same thing with an auto loan. Now, the one downfall with the auto loan, they may approve you with a 500 score, but your interest rate is 29%.
Crazy.
It's crazy. And so, I mean, it's literally like...
But then those are the same people who end up cars getting repoed.
It usually ends back up, and they get in a debt cycle, because here's what happened. You go to the dealership, they're going to give you the car that you can afford within your budget based upon your credit score. And typically it's a car that may not last. Right. But you have a loan for 3 to 4 years. So the car breaks down, you probably bought a lemon, and you got to trade it in, put the negative equity towards another lemon, possibly, and now you're upside down. So you just get in this debt cycle, and then you probably still have to put down 20 to 30%. Right. And I tell people, you might as well use the money that you're going to put towards the down payment to fix your credit. Then you can go to the dealership and get what you want, and you don't have to put any money down, and your payments will be cheaper. Like, I remember one of the first vehicles I purchased when I moved to Vegas, it was a Chevy Envoy. I don't even know if they make those anymore. The car was about $8,900. Yeah. my payment was $400 a month. Like, when I think back, I'm like, I got robbed.
But you needed a car, so
I needed a car.
Yeah, that didn't even matter.
I didn't even think about the interest because I just needed a vehicle.
And that's most people.
That is most people's situation.
Right. And that's how they end up getting caught in that debt cycle.
That trap, absolutely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's more people that is in poverty that gets caught in that type of cycle.
You know what? It's sad because even just from the debt cycle, more than 55% of people in the African American community have less than 500 in savings. You know, more than 50 people in the black communities don't even have a checking account, which is why payday loans, title loans, liquor stores, places where it costs 15% to cash your check, your work check. So it is sad, and that's one of the things that drives me in what I do, and wanted to educate people and letting them know, look, living with bad credit is expensive. Is really what it boils down to.
Absolutely, it's more expensive. It's actually way more expensive.
Way more.
Yeah. So when you are repairing the credit, and you know people come to you and they ask you, and they looking for a turnaround. What's normal turnaround for credit repair? So
I tell people you want to allocate at least 12 months. And the reason I say that is because, one, the period we're in now, the bureaus are fighting a lot of this stuff. But even more than that, like, even if I have a gut feeling that we can help someone within 4 months, I'm still going to tell you a minimum 12, because there are going to be things that may be out of our control that you may need to rectify in order to really see your score increase. So for example, most people think credit repair is automatically going to help increase your score, and that's not always the case. Here's why. You may have a bunch of debt on your credit that we can clean up, negative items, but if your credit usage is high, meaning you have a lot of credit card debt, your score isn't going to move. So you need to be able to allocate time to be able to pay down your credit card debt. And so that's us really just giving an individual a realistic expectation. And I often tell people, credit repair is not a get out of jail free card, because you still owe the debt. Right. And that's the thing we try to educate our clients on. And everything may not come off right away.
But most people think that everything is going to come off.
Oh, if we don't get something off, they think we're the scam. And I say, no, the scam is you not paying the debt.
That part.
that's the scam.
Like, you got to pay your bills,
you
man.
have to.
You know?
But people really say, like, I've literally heard people say, oh, I won't pay you, I'll just get my credit repaired. And that's the wrong mindset to have. And man, that's what I would say separates what my journey and goal has been, is to really educate people on the process of what it is, and understand it takes time. It may take you 2 years to fix your credit, and you have to allocate that time.
So after you allocate that time and getting your credit repaired, how do you actually, I know you talk about turning credit into cash, how do you actually turn credit into cash?
Man, this is one of my favorite topics. So the backstory to me even learning about that, and it's not a new strategy, it's just that we didn't understand how the wealthy have been operating. And so I remember seeing an interview with Robert Kiyosaki where he talked about he bought a property where he used the down payment from a credit card to acquire that property. And it blew my mind, because I'm like, how is that even possible? And so essentially, in short, how you turn credit into cash, when you have great credit, I always say it's a hack, a credit hack, where you can go to the bank and get unsecured revolving credit, i.e. credit cards, lines of credit, etc., etc. You can utilize the money on those credit cards to use to invest in real estate, to invest in your business, to invest in inventory for your company, starting your business, growing your company. And so this is what the wealthy have been doing forever. We just hadn't been invited to the party and learning what they've been doing. And so it's really a concept. I call it creative financing, because most people, especially in the black community, we run to the bank and say, hey, I want to get a business loan. They're going to turn you down, because they know statistically 9 out of 10 businesses are going to shut down within 1 to 3 years. But when you go into the bank and say, hey, let me get a line of credit, or let me get a credit card, whether it's personal or business, because it's all capital, the percentages of approval increases by almost 90+%. Because here's the other thing: when you apply for a credit card, most banks don't ask for proof of income; they use stated income.
Right.
And so it's really just a strategy to help you get into the game of investing, business, et cetera, et cetera. So in layman's terms, how you turn credit into cash is you leverage your credit, get approved for revolving credit, cards, lines of credit, and you can use the cash off of those credit lines to invest into your business.
So would these be business credit lines or would these be personal?
Great question. So I always tell people capital is capital. You know, when it comes to playing with the bank's money. So whether it's a credit card, personal or business, it still spends. Like I often ask people when they say, hey, I only want business credit cards. I say, okay, if you're walking down the street and it's a 50 and 100 on the ground, which one are you picking up?
Definitely picking up the 100.
Why not both?
Well, of course. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, since you mentioned it, yeah.
Why not both?
You're correct.
And so that's the exact same way how credit works when it comes to personal and business. Because see, if I get a credit card in my personal name and I use that to go and buy a property, I'm still playing with the bank's money.
Right.
So it doesn't matter to me if it's business or personal. Now there's other strategy that come into play, because the main thing is that most people are utilizing the business credit primarily so that the DTI isn't on the personal, you know. So
right.
But you have to grow to the business credit.
Right.
You may not be in position right now, because when banks look to approve you for credit, they want to see personally that you can even handle credit. So you may have to build up your personal credit to show that you're credit worthy before you even start playing in that realm. So why not look at it as both? And then you have lines of credit, personally and business. You have installment loans. So there's several ways of getting access. I call it capital, that you can leverage and make that money make you money.
So what about people who have student loan debt? You know,
man. So let me say this before I get into that. I'm glad I dropped out of college. And I say that, you know, because 80+% of Americans have student loan debt. And I don't care what nobody says, it's a debt trap. Like the cost of student loans have increased, or excuse me, the cost of tuition has increased by over 88% over the past 20 years. But the information that you learn at these institutions have not changed.
It's the same.
It's the exact same. And so think of, like, colleges spend billions of dollars on marketing. Think about that. So what does that tell you? The institutions are businesses. Most of these colleges are private or nonprofit institutions. They don't even pay taxes, some of them. And so I say all of that to say, when it comes to student loans, if that's the path you choose, I always say you want to make sure that it's calculated. And when I'm speaking with parents who have students getting ready to go to college, I tell them to sit down and talk to their children and have them look at it as a business decision, because that student loan debt will affect you the rest of your life.
Right.
Like, think about it. You go to school for, let's say, underwater basket weaving, and I'm just making up something. It costs you $75,000 to get a 4-year degree. You're coming out making $25,000 a year. You'll never pay that off.
Right.
And so student loans have definitely been a debt trap of helping people to start building wealth, but it's still ways around that. And so I often tell people, even if you do have student loan debt, don't let that be the end all to thinking you can't build prosperity, because a lot of banks and lending institutions are actually accounting for, okay, everything else is in place. You maybe have your DTI may be high, but we understand that student loan debt is there, so we can still lend to you in some capacity. So it doesn't take away from someone who is trying to build wealth through leveraging their credit. I just say this is why you want to speak with the professional, speak with someone who actually knows this space, and understand that it's not the end all be all, and understand that, you know, student loan debt also, if it's in default, then we got to look at, okay, how do we get you out of default? Does it have to be disputed off the credit? Are they reporting the information accurately? So it really just depends on how the student loan debt is reporting on your credit report. And even from a home buying process, because I believe that homeownership is the easiest entry point for us in a Black community to start creating wealth. A lot of lending institutions actually extract a percentage of the student loan debt, so it's not calculated in a DTI to be able to help them with home ownership. So it's just really about doing your research, and don't be like, here's the one thing I often say, we're so worried about what may not happen, but we don't even know
because we don't try.
So don't let the student loan debt be the death of you.
Right. And so buying a home definitely is a great entry point to obtain wealth, and
it's mandatory for us.
Absolutely
mandatory,
because we're behind
tremendously.
Like, no matter what you see on social media or out in the streets, like, a lot of people, our people, are really suffering out here, man, when it comes down to building wealth.
You have to.
A lot of people don't understand, man. 1% or less actually obtain financial independence, and those are statistics. These are statistics. It's not nothing that I made up.
Right.
You know, you can go read up on it, Google it, whatever the case may be.
Right.
But these are statistics, and we have to understand, you know, as a culture, you know, what our job is, you know, what we need to do, and what's more important.
Absolutely.
You know, because delayed gratification is a real thing.
You have to.
You know, we have to put away, or, you know what I'm saying, like, we can't go out and go buy the Bentley truck or the, you know, the Moussain or whatever. We got to, you know what I'm saying, like, we have to delay those things, man, and go out and get the things that are more important.
Absolutely.
That's going to generate revenue, that's going to cash flow, that's going to appreciate.
Because the appreciation and cash flow can help you buy the Bentley truck.
There you go.
And that's what we got to start normalizing, that type of dialogue.
Every property that I own pays for something.
Real talk. Every
property that I own pays for a mortgage. It pays for a note, whatever it is.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It pays for something, and that's what we have to understand, you know.
Correct.
And like you said, financial literacy is definitely important. So I want to switch gears and ask you about, you know, I know you do the masterclass and
Yes.
the mentorships. So what do you teach your students about debt?
Great question. So here's one of the misconceptions about debt. When we hear debt, and I'm primarily talking to our people, when we hear debt, it has a negative connotation. Debt is actually good. But it's the type of debt. So there's 3 different types of debt structures. You have restructured debt, unstructured debt, and structured debt. Now, most of us are only familiar with unstructured debt. That's when people get in over their head. Mm-hmm. We buy the houses we can't afford. We buy the cars we can't afford. We're up to our eyeballs in credit card debt or whatever.
Stretched thin.
That's unstructured debt.
Yeah.
Restructured debt, structured debt is, I bought a property, I have a mortgage, but it's bringing me a 17% return, and that money that I'm making from that rent is financing a portion of my lifestyle. Like you say, it's paying for a vehicle, it's paying for my mortgage. That's structured debt. That's something we haven't really understood, because all we hear is the word debt.
Right.
Not knowing that structured debt, it's no different than if I own $1 million, a company that's producing $1 million in revenue, my profit margin may be 30%, which means 70% of it is debt. That's good debt, because I'm getting a 30% return off of $1 million business.
Right.
But because we just hear the word debt, we run away from it, but not knowing that everything else we do as consumers is debt that brings us no return on investment.
Right.
And so I really teach people about what structured debt is. And then you have restructured debt, which is what wealthy people have learned how to do very well. And that's called bankruptcy. Sometimes, you know, it may be a strategy. Maybe you're being sued. Maybe you're protecting your assets. Maybe you got in over your head.
Right.
Maybe you got stuck in a bad deal. But bankruptcy isn't the end of the world. Like most wealthy people who file bankruptcy are still multimillionaires.
Right. They're just protecting
their assets. And that's the thing we have to understand. And so I try to help us to normalize this type of dialogue and really educate them, because all we know is unstructured debt, which is the consumer debt. You know, we get a credit card and we go to Mexico, where that credit card could have helped you buy a vehicle that you could rent out and now you're driving the vehicle of your dreams for free.
Right.
So we got to really start understanding the power of structured debt.
Absolutely. And the same as we was just talking about delayed gratification.
Absolutely.
You know, instead of you taking that debt and going and taking a trip, you utilize it to make money.
Absolutely.
To pay for that trip.
To pay for the trip.
You know, and that's something that we, like you said, we got to normalize, you know, in our community. What is one of the, I guess, the biggest misconceptions about credit that, you know, people
Man, a couple things. One, they think credit repair is illegal, or they think credit repair is a get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
When it comes to credit itself, a lot of people, especially in the Black community, think they don't need credit until when they actually go and they need it. Like, I've had people who didn't think they needed credit and then went to go try to apply for the job of their dreams out of college. Oh, they run credit when you go as an employer. Like, a lot of people don't know law. When you graduate law school, you pass the bar, they run your credit before you can become an attorney. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that credit is just to buy a house, a car. Like, no, credit is like your digital fingerprint. And so when people really start to understand how important credit is, and it's an entry point to learning how to create wealth, but we just have to learn the strategies.
Right.
And it may take you years to learn it. Like, you can't go watch one YouTube video and think you're an expert. Like, LeBron James didn't become LeBron just by shooting one free throw a night before the game.
Right.
He probably shot tens of thousands before the game.
Absolutely.
And so the biggest misconception is that credit is bad. We don't need it. Big Mama told us credit is the devil. So it's so many different myths and cliches, but no, credit is your digital fingerprint.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. So this is just part one. Y'all stay tuned for part two. We're coming right back.